There is a specific kind of danger in trusting a man who wears his morality like a billboard. Most people assume that a firm handshake, a warm smile, and a vocal dedication to righteous living are guarantees of good character. But the truth is, a title is just a costume, and a reputation is only a shadow cast by what people choose to let you see. When the lights go out and the audience goes home, that is when you find out who someone really is. My father learned this the hard way. He is a pragmatic man, someone who believes in second chances, but he also possesses a quiet, unyielding spine when pushed too far. He doesn't shout. He doesn't threaten. He just dismantles your world. This is the story of how a man of the cloth thought he could steal from my father, mock his kindness, and walk away clean, only to discover that arrogance has a very steep, very immediate price. My father, Vance, owned a modest mid-century ranch house on the edge of town, a property he kept as a retirement investment. It featured original oak floors, a wide bay window, and a spacious backyard. When the previous renters moved out, Vance listed it again and quickly found what appeared to be the perfect tenants. Their names were Aldous and Torin, a father and son duo who practically radiated wholesome reliability. Aldous was the head pastor at a prominent local congregation, possessing that practiced, soothing baritone of a man used to projecting across a crowded sanctuary. Torin, his 20-something son, served as the church's youth director. They arrived at the viewing in pressed button-down shirts, spoke politely, and provided impeccable, albeit church-affiliated, references. Vance, a man of faith himself, felt an immediate kinship. He handed over the keys, confident that his property was in the hands of decent, God-fearing men. For the first 30 days, the arrangement was flawless. The lawn was mowed, the trash bins were brought in on time, and the neighborhood remained quiet. But the illusion fractured exactly 2 months into the tenancy. The first of the month came and went, leaving Vance's bank account untouched. When Vance reached out, Aldous offered a smooth, practiced apology. He spoke of unexpected medical bills and temporary cash flow issues, his voice dripping with pastoral sincerity. Vance, remembering the grace he had been shown in his own life, agreed to give them an extension. 30 more days passed. The rent remained unpaid. The phone calls went to voicemail. The text messages were left on read. Frustration began to curdle into resentment. Vance was now out 2 months of income, paying the mortgage out of his own pocket while 2 men lived in his house for free. Realizing that the situation was rapidly deteriorating, Vance drove out to the property and caught Aldous pulling into the driveway. He didn't yell. He simply laid out the cold mathematics of the situation. Vance offered a remarkably generous exit strategy. Pack up, vacate the premises by the end of the week, and he would forgive half of the massive debt they had accrued. Just leave and they could both move on. Aldous leaned against his sedan, crossing his arms. The warm, pastoral smile was gone, replaced by the shrewd calculation of a haggler. He countered the offer. Instead of paying the remaining half in cash, Aldous proposed leaving the house immaculately clean, abandoning all of their high-end furniture behind as collateral and compensation. Vance hated the idea of playing used furniture salesman, but the exhaustion of the ordeal weighed heavily on him. He just wanted them gone. He wanted his house back. He nodded, shaking Aldous's hand. The grip was firm, sealing a bargain that Vance assumed would finally end the headache. 3 days later, the move-out deadline arrived. Vance drove to the ranch house, an empty coffee cup rattling in his cup holder. The driveway was empty. No moving truck, no cars. He walked up to the front porch, slipped the brass key into the deadbolt, and pushed the door open. The stench hit him first, a sour, metallic odor of rotting garbage and stale beer. Vance stepped into the foyer, his boots crunching against broken glass. The house was completely gutted. The pristine oak floors were gouged with deep, jagged scratches, as if heavy appliances had been dragged across them by absolute amateurs. The promised high-end furniture was nowhere to be seen. The living room was barren, save for a pile of greasy fast food bags in the corner. Aldous and Torin had taken everything, but the betrayal went deeper than an empty room. Vance walked into the kitchen to find the refrigerator missing. They hadn't just taken their own belongings, they had stolen Vance's appliances. A cold anger began to pool in Vance's stomach. He walked out the back door and marched across the overgrown lawn toward the wooden storage shed. He undid the latch and swung the heavy doors open. Inside sat the 2 vintage leather sofas that Vance had left on the property, pieces he had intended to eventually move into his own study. They were utterly destroyed. The dark, rich leather had been slashed open, exposing jagged chunks of yellow foam like infected wounds. Mildew spotted the cushions, and a half-empty can of paint had been deliberately knocked over, a thick puddle of latex blue drying over the armrests. They hadn't just broken the deal. They had gone out of their way to vandalize his property before fleeing in the dead of night. Vance pulled his phone from his pocket, his jaw set so tight his teeth ached. He drafted a blunt, uncompromising text to Aldous, attaching photos of the gutted kitchen and the slashed leather sofas in the shed. He demanded the immediate payment of the original 2 months' rent, plus the full replacement value of the stolen appliances and ruined furniture. 10 minutes later, the screen illuminated with a reply. There was no apology. There was no pastoral grace. Aldous deflected with the smug, untouchable arrogance of a man who believed consequences applied only to other people. He promised vaguely that Vance would receive a check in 2 weeks when the church budget clears. Vance knew a stalling tactic when he saw one. He typed back, his thumbs hammering the glass screen, demanding the funds be wired by Friday at noon. The response came almost instantly. Good luck getting your money. Below the text sat a row of 3 crying laughing emojis. Vance stared at the little yellow faces mocking him from the screen. The air in the ruined living room felt suddenly very still. A different kind of man might have driven to the church and caused a scene in the parking lot. A louder man might have called the police, entangling himself in months of civil litigation and small claims court. Vance did neither. He simply locked the front door, got into his truck, and drove home. They wanted to play games with his livelihood. He was going to dismantle theirs. Vance understood the architecture of a congregation. A head pastor and a youth director do not operate with absolute authority. They answer to a board of elders, a group of prominent community members who manage the church's finances, its public image, and the moral clauses embedded in their employees' contracts. Aldous and Torin were the public faces of the ministry. They relied on an image of unimpeachable integrity to keep the tithes flowing. Sitting at his kitchen island, the glow of his laptop illuminating his focused expression, Vance became an auditor of vengeance. He located the church's website, navigating past the smiling photographs of Aldous and Torin straight to the directory. He found the email addresses for the 7 men who sat on the board of elders. Vance did not write an emotional plea. He wrote a sterile, factual report. He detailed the broken lease, the unpaid rent, the stolen refrigerator, and the deliberate destruction of the leather sofas. He attached the PDF of the signed lease agreement. He attached high-resolution photographs of the gouged floors and the slashed furniture rotting in the shed. Finally, he took a screenshot of the text exchange, the empty promises, the refusal to pay, and the laughing emojis. He titled the email Character Inquiry and Financial Theft regarding Pastor Aldous. He hit send, closed the laptop, and went to bed. The detonation occurred the following morning. At exactly 8:14, Vance's phone began to vibrate violently against the kitchen counter. The caller ID flashed Torin's number. Vance let it ring out. It immediately rang again. This time, Vance pressed the green icon and brought the receiver to his ear. He didn't say a word. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Torin's voice exploded through the speaker, shrill, breathless, and laced with absolute panic. The smug superiority from the day before had entirely evaporated. "You went to the elders over a stupid rent dispute. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Vance took a slow sip of his black coffee, listening to the youth director hyperventilate. "They pulled my dad into a closed-door meeting at 7 in the morning. Torin practically screamed, the desperation cracking his voice. "They're talking about suspending us without pay. They're talking about a morality clause violation. You're trying to ruin our lives over a couple of couches. This is so unfair." "Unfair," Vance repeated, his voice dangerously low, stripped of any warmth. "You stole from me, you destroyed my property, and you mocked me. The Lord might forgive you, Torin, but I am just a landlord, and my patience ran out yesterday." Vance ended the call. He set the phone down. Almost instantly it began to ring again. He ignored it. It rang a 3rd time, a 4th. A 5th. Over the next hour, Torin and Aldous attempted to call him 10 separate times. The silence Vance offered in return was a heavy, suffocating weight. He could perfectly visualize the chaotic scene in the church administrative offices. 2 men who had built their entire identities on the perception of righteousness, suddenly scrambling to explain away photographic evidence of their petty vandalism to the men who signed their paychecks. The elders had clearly given them an ultimatum: settle the debt immediately, silently, and completely, or pack up your desks. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, Vance's phone chimed with a different kind of notification. It was an alert from his banking app. A direct wire transfer had just cleared. The amount covered the 2 months of back rent, the cost of a brand new refrigerator, and the exact appraised value of the two vintage leather sofas. It was every single cent they owed him, paid in full before the banks closed for the weekend. Vance looked at the glowing numbers on his screen. A small, humorless smile touched the corners of his mouth. Later that evening, when he recounted the events to me, he wasn't celebrating the sudden influx of cash. He shook his head, staring out the window into the fading twilight. It was never about the money. It was about the sheer audacity of a man who believed his clerical collar granted him immunity from basic human decency. Vance was disappointed, deeply so, in men who shared his faith but lacked his integrity. But he had forced them to look in the mirror, and he had made them pay for the privilege. True character is not defined by the speeches you give to a crowded room or the titles you print on a business card. It is defined by what you do when you hold the keys to someone else's property, when you think no one of consequence is watching, and when you believe you hold all the leverage. Integrity is quiet, arrogance is loud. And arrogance almost always leaves a paper trail. When you are wronged by someone hiding behind a shield of false virtue, do not lower yourself to their level of petty mockery. Gather your evidence, find the people who hold them accountable, and let the truth do the heavy lifting. The loudest bullies are always the fastest to crumble when the spotlight finally hits their shadows. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your own experiences with terrible tenants in the comments below. Let's keep exposing the frauds one story at a time.